So like I said in the intro, I was officially diagnosed with bipolar disorder in, I think it was 2011, and when I was 22, I went to, originally I talked to just my, regular doctor, and they were like, wow, this, what you're describing sure sounds like bipolar disorder, but you got to talk to, the experts, the psychiatrist, I guess. So I got referred to them, and they're the one that made that diagnosis. But it's definitely not about a label. And as I get into the later parts of the story, you'll certainly see that, I think. And but I wanted to, jump in at this part of the story and just mention it as kind of an anchor point. But before that, before we get into how that actually happened and what that meant and everything, I think the actual story begins a long time before that. So I want to go back to middle school, actually. So in middle school, it's when I used to really start dreaming seriously about getting rich. And you might think like, wait, what? What kind of a jump is this? Like, what does getting rich have to do with anything? But it has a lot to do with it because it wasn't about getting rich to buy a Lambo or even a free candy vending machine or whatever, a kid at that age was dreaming of. I was probably dreaming of Lego sets or whatever. But in terms of getting rich, that was absolutely not what I was dreaming of. The actual reason why is because I saw my dad and other people working 9-to-5 jobs that seemed to make them miserable, but they seemed trapped in them. So like I would see my dad come home from work and just be miserable, just always being miserable, and sort of, he wouldn't necessarily complain about work per se, because work was kind of, I think, a coping mechanism for him. So he wouldn't necessarily complain directly about work, but it was obvious that having to go into work every day for 40 years until he could retire just made him miserable. Like, it was clear that he didn't want to do his job 40 hours a week. Like, he might have liked some aspects of it, but he definitely didn't want to do it all the time. And he wasn't the only one. It just seemed to be kind of the way things went. And, I was thinking about this. It sounds funny, a middle schooler thinking about such things, but it was a really big deal to me. And the reason was because it seemed like I wasn't going to have the capacity to do that. I saw that and I was like, there's just no way. I could never do a 9-to-5 job like that for 40 years and retire. Like I even at that age, at that young age, I was like, I don't see how I could possibly do that. And I thought, maybe I get older and become a quote adult or something, and this would get easier. But I had this really strong intuition that just that just wasn't going to work for me. I already knew at that point it just wasn't possible. I had already started developing this thing where I could work really hard for shorter periods of time, maybe a year or something. I guess it's not super short, but in the grand scheme of, working 40 years straight or whatever, yeah, I could work really hard and do a lot in that time. But then I couldn't. I had to, I don't know, maybe it was burnout. I don't know. I knew, though, that just doing something consistently 9 to 5 every day it just felt impossible. And so as a kid, I would sit there and dream about getting rich just so that not so I wouldn't have to work. I still wanted to work. I liked to do things. Even then, even at that age, I was like, oh, I love making things. I like working, but I don't want to be trapped in a job. I think that was really it. Feeling, having that like worry that I would be trapped in a job. And so as a middle schooler, I dreamed about getting rich all the time. And I love to engineer and design and learn things. It's seemingly, more than other kids. But I could see like these other kids, they had more capacity, to consistently do their homework, consistently do things. I didn't have that capacity. I didn't have it in me. I got lucky in grade school because I just was naturally, I did study hard, but in bursts. I think I was also naturally probably more able than a lot of kids when it came to school, so I didn't have to work as hard in general. And so a lot of other kids I know saw, they were like jealous of me because they're like, wow, look at Thomas. He doesn't have to like study or, do a whole lot, but still is able to ace things and whatever. But the thing was, I was jealous of them because I was like, I know that I don't actually have the capacity to do what they're doing to achieve what they're achieving. And so, yeah, it was, I don't know, it sounds kind of strange to talk about, as a kid that young, but that's how it was. Even for me back then, I dreamed of, I remember like I had this dream of coming up with a new source of energy, like inventing this new source of energy, and it would just provide me enough consistent income that I wasn't tied into a job. I wasn't trapped in a job. And I had all sorts of dreams like that. And I dreamed like, okay, here's how I'll like make it all sustainable and make it all work. And then I was like, oh, this would free me up to work on things I really care about and I really want to do. And it seemed great. And as I remember as a kid at that age, it seemed so necessary, so required that I basically assumed it would happen. I was like, I have to be rich by the time I'm like 25, because after that, like, there's no way I can keep working a 9-to-5. There's no way I can do that. Like, I hit that point. I didn't know when that point was, but I was like, I know there's just no way. I already knew my body. I knew this wasn't going to work. I was like, I got to be rich before that. I got to invent something, create some app, start some company. It doesn't matter what. I got to do it before then, or I'm just screwed, I was like, I'm not going to survive. Okay, so where were these feelings really coming from? And I think in high school, I can definitely start tracing this down to it. It was when I first started getting what I would call depressed. I don't honestly remember it too well, but I do remember just months where I just didn't have the energy to do anything. Even the stuff I loved. It's all very vague because I think I didn't really realize it was even unusual. To me, it just seemed normal. It seemed normal in the sense that I was like, oh, everyone must go through this. But I remember at the same time also thinking like, wow, it seems like other people. So I think what it was I thought at the time, everyone's just like me and goes through the same things I do, but they seem to be able to handle it better. And so I would go for these months of just not having energy to do anything. And I would think, oh, other kids must be doing this too. They must be going through this too. But somehow they're still doing their homework at the same rate and hanging out and doing whatever kids did, at the same rate. Whereas I definitely, it was like an ebb and a flow. So I would sometimes, but sometimes not. And I actually spent a lot of high school. I'll talk more about this later, but I also thought this was normal for some reason. I would sort of partially run away a lot from like during the day or even sometimes for part of the night. I would just leave my parents' house, and there was a stream nearby, and I spent so much time there. I would take our dog. We had this yellow lab golden retriever mix, and I love that dog so much. We did everything together. I cried on that dog so many times, but we would go down to the stream, and I used to fish and just do my homework down there, just hang out down there. Spent a lot of time there. It was definitely an escape. What started happening was in about midway through high school, I started developing this pattern where I would do well in school, do my schoolwork, and then I just couldn't. Nothing would happen for weeks, maybe months at a time. I wouldn't do my homework. I'd slept through all my classes. And then all of a sudden I'd be like, oh, I have like a D in all my classes. And so I would study really hard and try to catch back up. And I got really lucky thinking back about this because I did a lot of programming. I started programming in middle school, and I would make all these programs. Like I made this AP flashcard program for learning stuff in my AP courses, and I would share it with other students, provide them the vocabulary list. And so my teachers, they would see this kind of stuff and they loved it, and they gave me a bunch of extra credit. And so I might have like a C in the class, but all the extra credit they gave me for making all these programs and stuff would always get me pretty much up to an A. And so yeah, it was just this really weird pattern. I would stay up. I probably averaged only 4 hours of sleep, and I would stay up. Like the thing was, like, sleep, it was hard to fall asleep a lot because I was so internally stressed. And so the way I coped with it was just don't sleep until you're completely exhausted. I would get up at 5 every morning to do programming or reading. I used to read like a chapter book every day on top of programming. I would I would go to school and print off programming books from the internet, when the teacher wasn't looking. I'd print off like 300 pages and throw them in a binder and go home and learn Perl the next day, staying up till 3 a.m, getting up at 5, studying it some more. And so I definitely had this pattern that I thought everyone must have. I don't know why I thought this, like in hindsight, like that doesn't make sense. Like I didn't see evidence of that, but it's what I did. So I studied on and off, and my grades would go up and down. I ended up getting fine grades, even though I don't know if it was completely deserved compared to the other students. But yeah, that was definitely the start of some of the